They'll blanket you in Wi-Fi and profit off the radiation. Congregation collecting the people for that Satan. I keeps it blazing, cause I can read between the lines. I ain't blind, we unwind what they're really saying. Genetically modify what you're tasting. Loan you that college promise, so now you live up in your mom's basement. Redesign time so your mind is always wasted. Programmed to crave the basics. Keep the beta in stasis. Pay the state, kid. You're in debt for being born. Messengers are more than just the price for being warned. Don't be alarmed, disconnect from their machinations. Stop subscribing to the folly of own nations. Bone breaking ain't the answer, cause they seek the ownership of souls. Spread the seeds and watch them grow. Break the chains of control. Break the chains of control.
Sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. Tonight on Rogueways, we have the immense pleasure of speaking with an old school warrior for truth on the front of humanity's fight against the global cabal of corrupted black goo pretending to be leaders in public health and policymakers. He started with JFK's assassination and has not stopped speaking out since then. He's host of I Protest with Donald Jeffries and America Unplugged. He is the author of bestsellers Hidden History, Survival of the Richest, Crimes and Cover-Ups in American Politics, and Bullyocracy. Donald Jeffries, welcome to Rogueways, and how are you doing tonight?
Fine, thanks for having me.
Oh, and it looks like we can't see you now. I asked you to turn your camera off, and now we can't see you. Actually,
camera on. Can you hear me?
Actually, I see that everyone else can see you, just not me. Which I guess we'll just roll with that. So that looks good. That works okay.
You can hear me, right?
I can hear you and see you, and hopefully everyone else can hear you too. So if anyone out there is watching or listening and you can't, just let us know, so that we can do what we can to fix it. But it should be working. This happened another time where I couldn't see the person.
It's telling me your computer is not allowing Riverside to record. Please refresh to continue recording. If I refresh, I think that'll knock me out. I don't know. That's weird.
Oh, try it and see. I can actually see you now because you just popped in somehow.
Okay.
This is live. That's how it goes.
Okay, it says reload site. Okay, hopefully you don't lose me here.
All right, we'll see what happens. Fingers crossed. Hopefully we get Don right back. I do want to shout out friends at Content Safe, where podcasting and multi-platform video hosting is made easy. If you are in the biz, check them out. Make sure your content is safe. And also support what you love and share value back where you found it. If you love Rogueways or Middle Path, please support my work by grabbing Audible books, paper copies of my books with channeled inscriptions, or going from the site and the shop there. One-on-one sessions with me from Calendly. Okay. Links to all of this is on my site at rogueways.org. You can also get a membership and support the show on rockfin.com/rogueways, on subscribestar.com/rogue-ways, or on rogue.locals.com. You get special content just for supporters on any of those. I got courses on rogueways.thinkific.com and all kinds of merch available too. All the links are on rogueways.org or on my link tree. Don, you're back. We can see you. I think we can hear you. Okay. It's perfect. So I have a pointless question of the episode for you, and that is, what is the best kind of cookie? You weren't ready for this, I know.
No. I probably still would Oreos.
Ooh, yeah.
Oreo cookie.
That's a great choice. I just had a monster cookie the other day, so I'm kind of on the monster cookie cake wavelength for now.
Sure. The giant chocolate ones in.
Yes. Oreos just a straight traditional black and white.
Well, they, double stuffed. I don't much, but they're double stuffed, or anything. They make all kinds of different kind of Halloweens will be coming out, so it's hard to make a bad Oreo.
It's true. The frosting is the best part, so double stuff just makes sense. It is interesting. When I asked you if you wanted to be on Rogueways, this date was open and you jumped for it. It is 9/11. It's what's on everybody's mind, and you are one of the people who definitely has some thoughts about 9/11. And I titled this episode America 2.0 because of the piece that you released today on your Substack, which I highly recommend everyone go to Substack and find Donald Jeffries' really cool Substack to be subscribed to. But yeah, here we are. It's 9/11, 21 years later, I think.
Yeah, what else could I have written about today? Yeah, so I don't know if I invented the term America 2.0, but I've popularized it. Maybe, I don't know. I use it all the time, but as I wrote in the piece today, I think that probably we began transitioning to America 2.0 on 9/11 or right after 9/11. So I think that was, it's telling me to refresh again. Can you hear me okay and see me okay?
I can hear you and see you. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just
Um,
ignore that then. It's fine. I don't know why it's doing that, but
Everyone's saying you
so
sound good. So yeah, I think we're good.
good. Okay. So I think that once that happened, once we crossed that line, we began the steady road down. I don't think, for instance, the what I call the greatest psyop in the history of the world, it's been going on for the last couple of years. I don't think that would have been possible if we hadn't started down this path on 9/11. I mean, things weren't great in America 1.0. There's a lot of corruption there as well, but America 2.0 is increasingly becoming an Orwellian nightmare. And as anybody alive today can see that. But because you had some, again, if people can read my article, I go over 9/11 extensively in Hidden History, which is probably still my best. And I just completed Hidden History 3. I sent it off to the publisher, so hopefully they'll take it and be publishing it maybe next year. And I go even deeper into it in that book. And when looking at the minutiae and stuff, just because I mean, I don't know what it takes to convince people if you're on the fence. And I doubt if anyone listening to this show is on the fence about 9/11. I'm pretty sure that just about everybody listening, I imagine, doesn't find any credence in the official story. But once they could pass something like that on to people, and it just, you see the result of it. You had the Homeland Security Department of Homeland Security didn't exist before. Constitutional monstrosity. The Patriot Act was passed, zones, all the rest, and it really paved the way to mass mandates and the last couple of years.
Yeah, I was just reflecting on this too. And so your piece this morning was really nice for me because it was confirming what I was already kind of thinking about the other day about how life was. And I was young. I think I was 18 or something when it happened, 19 maybe, on 2000, on 9/11, 2001. But I remember just the quality of the sort of zeitgeist, was just wildly different. And just little things I was talking about today about walking to the airport and walking to the gate and meeting the person coming off, and how simply wonderful that was, or it seems now. And now you can't even imagine that. If you weren't there then and you didn't experience life much as a somewhat adult or young adult, then you don't know how much it's changed, and you just accept this as like the, I don't even want to say it, the way things are now. I'll say something different.
And you got to experience some time in America 1.0. Not as much as me, but I mean, so the little things you took for granted afterwards, you go back even, I could tell you things that we could do in the 1970s and the 1980s that, especially the 70s, you weren't born yet, but that you wouldn't believe. I mean, we had so much more personal freedom. And I was complaining then. I'm always a radical. It's not, I woke up when I was a teenager, so I've been awake ever since. But I was always trying to wake everybody up around me. But I was complaining all the time then, about things that were happening that I didn't like. But I mean, it's, that looks like a utopia now in comparison, because we had so much more personal freedom. Things you could do on just things like on the job. So many people stress out on dead end jobs that they have to work if they're lucky enough to have one, and living paycheck to paycheck, and they've lost so many benefits, and they're so much more anal about time and things like that. Again, back in that period of America 1.0, it was if let's say you got in a traffic jam on the way to work or something, which can happen to anybody, and so you're running 10, 15 minutes late. It was no big deal, at least in the jobs I had. And now, that might be, hey, that happened 3 times this month, you're going to have to go. That's the way it is now. Those are the things nobody talks about. The left doesn't talk about it. And I came from the left. I think that's what makes me different, is that I was a member of the ACLU when I was a teenager. I was a card-carrying member back when they cared about civil liberties. But no one seems to care about civil liberties now. So.
No, and I'm so confused about the ACLU actually because I still thought they cared about civil liberties, but they don't actually. We learned that in the last 2 years at least. Maybe I hadn't been paying attention and it's been a longer descent than that, but especially in the past 2 years, I was like, oh, I guess they're complete garbage now. They seemed all right not that long ago.
Yeah, well, they certainly, they've been completely silent on these the greatest travesty of justice maybe in American history, and that's what's going on with the political prisoners in Washington D.C. Talking about a year and a half that these people have been held behind bars, denied a speedy trial, denied all due process, mostly for, if you can even consider it a crime, would be misdemeanors that might require a fine or something. Denied counsel and things like that. Alleged beatings in solitary confinement. You can't even imagine that. But the ACLU is completely silent on it. And there are no civil libertarians left except me, I guess. Whatever platform I have, no one else is talking about it. And it's just unbelievable. It's unforgivable that that no one is standing up for these people. And I've had people that watch my show, I Protest, on Rockfin, live streams on Rockfin every Friday from 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern. I've had several of these J6 defendants. I had 2 of them on the show 2 days last Friday.
Awesome.
And I've had people on that they want to remain anonymous because they're scared to be prosecuted. And the woman I had on, one of the people I had, she faces 30 years in prison for doing nothing but she tried to stop people from breaking a window, and she got beat really bad by the cops. So that's the story that's there, and no one seems to be talking about it outside of our world.
Well, they really have been convinced that this is somehow unprecedented or that it's this like huge attack. And you can look at what was the event not that long before that, but it was while Donald Trump was in office, and there was like a siege practically going on. They burned down that church that's across the street.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm talking about? Nobody cares about that. No, right? So it's obvious and transparent how political it is that these people are being targeted for this, abused for this so severely. And like you said, the outcome is that people are then afraid. They're afraid to speak up. They're afraid to speak out. They're afraid to go to actions like these because this could happen to them, they think.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the reasons why you haven't seen more. I mean, I don't know, because Americans are so apathetic in it. I'm very critical of Americans, maybe too critical, but the fact that they're so apathetic and they've really protested less than you see in places like France and even England over the lockdowns and the mask mandates and everything. But I guess if you look at what happened to the ones who go to Washington D.C. to protest what sure seemed like a massive election fraud, then maybe you can understand. They don't want to. I mean, I don't want to. Be. That's why I don't. People tell me all the time. I live to Washington D.C. How come you're never in any of these things? Well, I'm not going to go unless I know there's at least hundreds of thousands, because I don't want to be singled out and thrown into jail. And I'm glad I didn't go to that rally on January 6th, because it might have been possible. If my son had wanted to go, I would have gone with him. But luckily he had enough sense not to go. And for the record, I have an alibi that day. I was in a dentist chair, so ironclad alibi.
Yes, it's good. You may need it. And it's true. How much of that do you think is that cultural shift you were talking about? Or in the 60s and 70s and whatnot, we had this much more privacy and much more personal freedom, and just that atmosphere again of like that you could talk about whatever, you could criticize whatever. Like this has all sort of shifted so much, and 9/11 had a big part of that, like you said. And as you've been pointing out, of shifting us away from, I mean, even this place we're in now where you can rat out your neighbors. I just saw something in the UK where they're encouraging people to rat out their neighbors for energy consumption. And I'm like, it's literally Orwellian. Like, this is where we're at now. And 9/11 was like one of those turning points where we headed that way, like you said. And so how much of this apathy or this lack of what seems like people standing up against it is that? And how much maybe it's just, I don't know, just pure not knowing or thinking clearly. I don't know. There's so many things.
Well, so much of that is out of the Orwell playbook. I mean, so much in 1984 has come true. And, in 1984, they had the children ratting out their parents, tattling on them if they were offending any of Big Brother's decrees. So you had I think they called it the Junior Anti-Sex League that was watching for that. All these things that were going on in 1984. And obviously, when you had things like, and you saw some of that during the lockdown, you had lots of neighbors that were phoning in and reporting their neighbors for not wearing mask mandates or not social distancing or whatever, maybe hugging illegally. I don't know what they were, but things like that. And it's very sad to think that people would turn on each other like that. But that's the society we've become. And even worse, you have families, because so many families have been torn apart by this. And you have just going to January 6th. I know there's at least two examples of, in one case, a daughter saw her mother on television being beaten by a cop at the protest on January 6th. She recognized her mother and called the authorities and reported and turned her in.
Oh my
I mean, just
God.
think of that. And I think that you had another one where a son turned his father into the same kind. So just imagine it, how bad that is anyhow. But your own child, turns you into the authorities. I mean, that's where America is now. We're so divided, and families mean nothing now. I can tell you from my own family, and I'm not vaccinated, and my kids aren't vaccinated, and everybody else pretty much in the family is. And we've already missed one wedding because of that. Only the vaccinated can come. Well, it's all right. We're not getting vaccinated, and it's very sad. They're not going to be Thanksgiving. They're not going to be big Thanksgiving meals or Christmas meals because of that, because they don't want to be around us. And that's happening in families all across the country. So that doesn't surprise me at all that people, and it's just sadder because that's worse than mask mandates, because apparently they're going to have a heating shortage. And I guess some people over there are going to be freezing to death. And I guess maybe if they attempt to get their loving neighbors or maybe family, will call the authorities on them.
Yeah. And what does it require? Like, what happens to your soul or your mind that makes you the person who's like happy to do this for those
Yeah.
people? No matter what sort of side you might be on, or liberal, conservative, or anarchist, or anything, it doesn't really matter. How did anyone come to trust the state over their family and friends, and think that those people are out to help them? Have we ever seen evidence that they were going to help us?
No,
I don't know that we
no,
have.
but again, this is, we didn't, and my hidden history books, and that's what I write about. We didn't come to this point in time accidentally. There were good reasons for why things are the way they are now. And all you have to do is study just even recent history. But you could start at 9/11 if you want, just see what's happened since then. You go back to farther back than that in my book, Crimes and Cover-Ups in American Politics. But in hidden history, I started with the JFK assassination. So, for most people alive, maybe that's where they thought that things started to really go downhill and open their eyes a little bit. Maybe it's the first conspiracy in their minds. And so you can see things did start going downhill, because I've always said that I think by most empirical evidence, America was probably at its peak economically and culturally in every way on November 22nd, 1963. I think that's pretty much where the apex of America. And ever since that time, it's been a steady, slow downhill plunge. And certainly we've been incredibly fast rate since September 11th, 2001. And it's just incremental things that happen when you have things like, and I'll just give some examples. You have things like Waco, where you had religious extremists, as they call them, but you had people practicing their religion, which they're supposed to be allowed to do under the First Amendment. May not be our religion. We may think it's weird, but they were killed, murdered by the government in their own home or compound, as the media demonized them as. But women and children, and they were killed with military tanks and with a gas poisonous gas that is banned by the Geneva Convention. So we can't even use that gas in warfare, but we killed American citizens. Now, you want to talk about impeachable offenses. So if that wasn't an impeachable offense for Bill Clinton, I don't know what would have been. But nothing happened. I remember at the time arguing about it then with people, and nobody cared all around me. And I said, do you realize what is happening here? They killed American citizens in their own home for no, and with a gas that's banned by the Geneva Convention. Again, nobody cares. That's just one example. We passed that over, and then of course, they had the entire history in the Middle East. Starting with the absurd Gulf War, and then the weapons of mass destruction, all that nonsense. The huge lie that everybody agrees is a lie now, but look at what happened and how many people died. We know in Iraq alone that it's recognized that about 1 million babies died because of the embargo on baby formula to Iraq alone. That's when Madeleine Albright, very famously said, "Well, had to say it was worth it." It's like, what? So these are the people leading us. So what's happening now is not surprising if you just know a little bit of history, because you just look back and see what has been done just within our lifetimes. And it's unfortunately it happened because not enough people objected, and certainly now, as done as America has gotten, you can see at least half of America right now approves of the treatment of those political prisoners in Washington, D.C. And they're the ones that are buying this crazy COVID narrative and getting, vaccines every other week and boosters and still getting COVID and not blinking at all. I mean, it just doesn't compute. It's like, does this make any sense to you? You're getting multiple vaccines for something and then you still supposedly get it. So that's what we're, people like you and I, that's what we have to try to battle. How do we get through to people like that? I don't know. I people ask me all the time, and I haven't been able to influence. My son is the only one in my family that is awake besides me. He's my comrade, but I haven't been able to wake up anybody else. In fact, most of them, most of my extended family thinks I'm crazy. So, and they don't, they wouldn't listen to 1 second of me talking or read one page of my books. So it hurts in a way, but I know that's the way it is. And I'm grateful for the people that I hear from every day that do like what I do and, do enjoy reading my work or listening to me. So you just got to go with that. But yeah, it's sad, but it's a reality. That's the reality we all face.
Yeah, it's really hard. As you said, families are torn apart and longtime friends are torn apart. Marriages end over things like, COVID and what's happening. And it is so crazy to me. Like you said, you wrote these books, they're bestsellers, and people who know you would rather dismiss you entirely than even investigate. And I've always thought I've never lost anything by investigating anything. I've never lost it. I've always gained in the end, even if I come away going, no, I still don't agree with that, but I understand more now why you do, right? Like that's good enough for me. I don't understand the fear and the resistance to just investigating.
Well, they might, I suspect that some of them have read and do listen to me. They just don't want to admit it. But, I think that a lot of this, because as I said, I've been awake my entire adult life. And so they've heard a lot of this stuff before. They heard me talking about this at cookouts and, holiday gatherings and things like that. So, because I was always talking about this stuff. I was never shy about, and I was trying to wake up people even then without knowing that's what I was trying to do.
Yeah.
But, and I recognize that a really bad reality end up happening at time. But, so it could just be that, they got tired of it. And people, human beings are, always reluctant to say, yeah, you were right, or I was wrong, because especially as the more they object to what you're saying, then the more egg they have on their face when they have to. And most people don't want to admit they're wrong. It's hard for people to even just say I'm sorry a lot of times. Yeah. But right now we should be in the middle. You see that meme that's going around and says, us we conspiracy theorists, we should be in the middle of the greatest, loudest I told you so in the history of the world. But we don't get to say that. We don't get that satisfaction because the other side is either still so dumbed down, or even if they realize that they're not going to admit we were right, because they have dug in so much against what we're saying. They're never going to say, I'm sorry, God, it was ridiculous. We broke the family up. We did all this stuff. And you were right. People, it's just not human nature.
They've put more and more and more into it. They have more and more to, which is again, for me, my perspective, I'm like, well, you have only anything to gain by saying, okay, I see the truth now. Let's,
Yeah.
but I get that it's an emotional, in the end, it's an emotional failing, and it's very, very common. We have lack of self-responsibility, and we have lack of just emotional cognizance, even just even knowing, like, how do I feel or why do I feel it? And I feel like that's part of this problem altogether. I feel that's why psychopaths can so easily lead people unthinkingly into their own destruction. And I feel like it's how we get to this point too, where we don't get to even say, remember that thing I said, and you told me I was crazy and you kicked me out of the house, and see now how there's like an article in your newspaper, your like New York Times or your CDC publication that says that I was right. Remember that? We don't get to say that because I don't know, it'll hurt their feelings too much, or
right.
They just won't acknowledge it. They can't. They have too much to lose, I guess. It
No,
is very sad. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it is. And you're right. And you're right. They're just not going to admit it. And so that's why, I don't bother. I mean, I don't, in that case, I don't get to see very many people in my family outside of, my immediate family anymore. And that's, that is what it is now, but if I did, when I was seeing them, even before this COVID narrative hit, they'd already kind of started to ignore it. So I stopped talking about what I was doing. It just, because I knew it wasn't important to them for whatever reason, or they wanted to ignore it. So, I just talk about something else. But now, if they were around me, I don't know what I would do, because I don't see how you can avoid this subject. But it's just,
I know
it's
really hard to talk about weather.
Yeah, it is.
6 hours or however long you're going to be together.
And people, I had G. Edward Griffin on one, with the real dean. He's almost 91 years old.
Wow.
Of the conspiracy world, in my eyes. Right, the creature from Jekyll Island about the Federal Reserve, and great guy, still very. He always has resisted the temptation to say "I told you so," because he say, people. That's the last thing people want to hear is that you were stupid. And so it's hard to do. It's a fine line to walk, because you would hope that they would be big enough to realize, hey man, you were. But I haven't heard. I heard from one person, and it was a long time ago. It was well before I became a writer. I heard from a guy that I worked with, hadn't seen in 20 some years, and he called. It was when Oliver Stone's JFK came out, and he actually called me. I hadn't heard from him again. He goes, "Man, I was just thinking of you, Hal. Back then you were the only one that was talking about this, and that was all in the news. I started getting interested in too, so it felt good that he sought me out to do that."
Yeah.
But no one's called and said, hey, I'm reading your books and everything. I remember when you were talking about this so long ago, and hey, it turned out you were right. But, I guess people just don't do that. But, and it's not that we want to be right. I don't want to be right about any of this stuff.
No.
I wish they had been right, and I wish, I wish I had been crazy, but I think the proof is in the pudding. I mean, just look all around you. I mean, we're very close to getting a digitalized currency. And if we have that, I mean, then you're right in the middle of, you talk about a science fiction movie. You just, have a digitized currency that is tied to a social credit score. So, basically what we're doing tonight would be impossible. Even something like that would wreck our credit score. And we would go to pay a bill the next day, log into our account. Sorry, you shouldn't have done that podcast, or you shouldn't have tweeted this tweet. That's the reality. Again, you try to warn people, and these are the same people that were unmoved by American citizens being killed at Waco and things like that. The anomalies of 9/11, and still think Oswald shot JFK. So they're not going to care, because their rationale is, well, all right, I'm not going to say anything that'll ruin my social credit score, and so they'll be fine. They don't care if you aren't.
That's the sort of ultimate level of that snitching culture we're talking about, where the neighbors are willing to turn you in for anything, is this social credit thing, because it's the ultimate end of that idea that I'm not going to behave in this way that I know is right and that I actually want to behave in, because of the consequences that might happen to me. And honestly, I feel like this is already going on. I talk about this a lot, and I know a lot of people have had this experience too, where, various search engines we already know report different outcomes to different people based on their politics. That's not very far different from a social credit score. That's been going on for years. And I run into far too many problems at airports, just electronically, in all of my communications that don't make sense for one person to come across. And so I have to assume that we've had some version of this for some time. This will just make it more. That's maybe all the testing of it, right? This central bank digital currency that they're trying to roll out everywhere is going to make it ironclad. There'll be no escape from that.
No, yeah, and that's, again, it ought to frighten everyone, but it just doesn't seem to. You try to talk to. Yeah, and it just. You think that as many Americans that have read 1984, it used to be required reading in high school, that at some point it would dawn on them that, gosh, I guess we didn't listen. Look, it came true. And because, we're just like thought crime, and again, I'm one of the few people. I objected from the very moment I heard the term hate speech. And
Yeah.
because I know what it meant, and so many people accepted it, and now the entire left accepts it. It's gospel to them. But to me, hate speech, it's just another way of saying thought crime.
Yeah.
Because you're saying, because what does it mean? Hate's a human emotion, which everybody hates, and it's in the eye of the beholder. And again, it's such an asterisk to put on free speech, and the left doesn't care. They're okay with it because, well, and I've heard them say, the First Amendment doesn't protect hate speech. What are you talking about? It doesn't say what the word hate doesn't appear in the Constitution, but where they are, I remember that Chris Cuomo, who's supposedly a lawyer, allegedly, who was also a journalist. At one point, he was, trying to denigrate the First Amendment, as pretty much anybody on CNN would, and he was saying, read your Constitution. The First Amendment doesn't protect hate speech. And it's, I wanted so much to be there next to him and say, okay, what are you talking about? Show me where in the Constitution it says that. But these are the people that have power. And that's, again, part of the problem is that people like us, we have the platforms we have, but we don't have platforms that can reach millions and like they do. And so they're able to persuade the masses. And I said, many times that, and there's so many podcasts like this that I go on, I do my own. Any one of us, if we were given a show on Fox News or CNN or MSNBC or something, it would instantly become, well, not instantly, but it pretty quickly become the top rated show on television because it wouldn't matter how, truth. Yeah, it wouldn't matter how good we were. Nice maybe if you could sell it better too, but it's because people would be hearing things, wow, and they would instantly give it more credibility because it was on television.
That's one of those things. This is why YouTube, people underestimate the power of not turning on the downvoting and, not allowing that ratio to be seen of how many people liked and disliked it and how many comments they'll allow to be seen, how many subscribers they'll allow you to have, even if you actually maybe in the course of your channel had millions, but so many have been unsubscribed or just kind of disappear that it looks like you don't. And people give credit to that. And you're right. If they just had that credit of you being on the cover of GQ or whatever, like on Fox or whatever, they would automatically just give you credence. And that's an unfortunate truth. It seems like a human trait, right? This is something that's built into us, that we need this hierarchy to tell us what's worth our time or something, instead of just evaluating it on our own. But man, that would be the day. That would be the dream. At least some people have some reach, but it would be very cool if we could have an organic growth to shows like these.
Yeah, exactly. Because even, Tucker Carlson touches on some things. He's not the best we have on network TV, and some of his shows are really good. He's interviewed some of the January 6th people. But just imagine, but he doesn't like so-called conspiracy. He's not going to talk the truth about 9/11 or JFK or anything. But imagine if you had a show that just focused on that. If I could have a show and I would just have, cover different historical incidents from my books and talk about, let's talk about Lincoln and what happened during the States, how political prisoners they had then, and all the precedents that were set, when the Constitution was trampled on, and we lost the entire reason for our founding. The reason we fought a war for independence was to fight for the consent of the governed. The idea was that all people everywhere have a right to consent to those who govern them. Well, that was shattered during the Civil War because clearly the South no longer consented.
Yeah.
And they told them, we're going to kill almost 1 million, and almost 1 million of you are going to die, just to show you that no, you don't get the right to consent. You're here whether you want to be or not. And that was a huge precedent to set, and that changed America dramatically. And unfortunately, even a lot of people in the conspiracy world don't see that.
Yeah.
But and the precedents we see, like for instance, if the civil libertarians or whatever, somebody ever really made enough of a racket about the political prisoners, and if they did, I am sure the government would cite the precedent of Abraham Lincoln, because he suspended the writ of habeas corpus because they would say this was an insurrection, just like that was, and so we had to throw them in prison. We couldn't, we had to. We're at war. What do they call it? What did Joe Biden just say? Oh, we're domestic terrorists, and half of America is fascist, and so that's what the excuse that they would use. They would cite that as precedent, much as they used Lincoln's precedent to send not only the Japanese, but also who ended up at least getting reparations, but also the Germans and Italians who didn't get any reparations. Lots of people were sent to concentration camps, and then it doesn't get reported because the Japanese at least had the benefit of being non-white in the eyes of the culture we have now. Yeah. But all of them were taken, and I'll have in Hidden History 3, I'll talk about the details of how not only, again, you're talking about these crimes in history and complain. They throw these people in concentration camps, but they stole their property. It's estimated that I think it was over $1 billion in German businesses alone that are, and they stole. They so when they get, again, citizens who had the wrong ethnicity. So you'd think liberals would care about that, but those some of the great crimes that go unreported. And again, it's why we are where we are today, because most people don't know about this stuff, unless you're probably not going to know about it. But so many of these things, and I'm sure I've missed a lot of them, but just the ones that I've written about, I mean, it's just the great crimes, incredible corruption that happens, and Americans didn't care, and they care even less now, obviously.
Yeah, that crime. There's actually a park that I loved in the area that I just lived in the Pacific Northwest before I moved here. And I just thought it was a nice place to go walk around and travel. There's a nice riverside walk, and there's this big barn, and it's all pretty. And finally one day I looked, and there's like a plaque over there, or, the board that tells you like the information. And so I went to read it, and it was a family who had been interned in a Japanese internment camp. And so that whole entire giant park had been their home and their homestead, and it was all just taken and gone. And so, I mean, at least we remember that one family, but that's really nobody, you're like you said, nobody even really thinks about it or knows. And the Civil War, especially, it's another thing. Like, you're not really allowed to question it or talk about it, and anything you're not allowed to question or talk about, it's probably what you should be questioning and talking about.
Exactly. And the fact that, again, Abraham Lincoln, he's the secular saint of our right now of our civilization, of the American civilization. So what does that say? And in my book, Crimes and Cover-Ups, I talk about it. I said, what does it mean for us that Abraham Lincoln is the great hero of this, is the greatest hero in our history, supposedly, right? The greatest president, the greatest man. And then, what does we say about honor? And I go over his litany of crimes. I mean, this is a man who was, everything about him is dishonest, from the fact that he was this poor guy raised in a log cabin where, as a matter of fact, his father was the largest landowner in his county. So he wasn't, again, none of these presidents ever come from poor, but he certainly didn't come from poverty. Lincoln was in the mythological things about how he walked 20 miles to return 10 cents. They have all these apocryphal stories about Lincoln, to try to a great hero. But you know what? Lincoln was a corporate lawyer. He mainly represented the railroads. I mean, to be honest with you, and not only did he never represented poor people or average people. And in fact, the most amazing thing about Lincoln, I'll have a lot about that in History 3, is that several times he represented the owners of runaway slaves. Slavery. He represented their owners in court. So Lincoln was no great emancipator. Everything about him is a lie. You can read his speeches. They sound like he was a grand wizard of the KKK, which was day. Most of them did. But so this is the guy. What does it say that we put this guy on a pedestal? And so he's really a fitting secular saint for this civilization. And I think he'd approve of everything. If Lincoln was alive, he'd be right there for mass mandates and social distancing and mass vaccines. And he'd probably love a digitalized currency and a social credit score.
Wow, that's such a great point, and that nobody sees through this facade. I remember every time I make a post on Facebook, I lose a bunch of people who weren't very good friends anyway. And one of them I made was something like, here's a quote from Lincoln, and I don't remember what it was, but it was something that, like you said, sounds like he's in the KKK or something. And then here's a quote from Grant, the guy you were told was the racist and the one who was trying to keep all the slaves. And he was saying how he wishes he could free all the slaves. And so what's really going on? I'm just asking a question, like what were we told and how does this fit with this? And people just freak out. Don't think about it. Don't answer the question. Just call you names and run away. I'm like, okay, bye, I guess. Right. I mean, it's just a question. Right. Again, if investigating it loses you something, like you're the one who's deficient. It should gain you something to investigate anything.
Absolutely. Well, I think you mean Lee, Robert Lee. Probably that was.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's and you're right.
Yes,
I mean, he was. And again, if you read the actual history of someone like a Robert E. Lee, he comes off. And again, history through, I'll have more of that. But you can read what people like General Sherman, William Sherman, who was, a war criminal if there ever one existed. This guy was a genuine psychopath. And you just look at what he did and, read the accounts from the South of the people who experienced his tyranny and his butchery and read his letters and the things he said, and then read the letters of Robert E. Lee or Jefferson Davis even. Again, I'm not trying to be a Confederate, but they come off as the reasonable ones. So, and that's just one instance, and that's why I'm not being sympathetic to Confederates or Nazis or Japanese in World War II. But again, in my book, I also talked about all the Allied war crimes in World War II, the bombing of Dresden, where the Allies, the English and the Royal Air Force mostly, and the Americans, something like 39,000 toddlers. One blow. Just think of that. I mean, they wiped out, they destroyed one of the most beautiful cities in the world, Dresden in Germany, and renowned for this priceless architecture and art, had no military value at all. It was just blatant murder. It was a war crime if such a thing existed. And in fact, when the Nazis went on trial, again, another thing, this I think sets me off for most people is even today you hear about in the conspiracy world, well, we need a Nuremberg trial for the people. No, the last thing you need is a Nuremberg trial. The last Nuremberg trial they'd set so many dangerous precedents because this was the first time in history of warfare. The world has been at war forever, but never before World War II did the victors ever think of putting the people they defeated in battle in court, and trying them legally, which is what they did. And they had show trials into all that and crimes and cover. I'm amazed that didn't cause more controversy. I don't even actually get, asked about it that much in interviews, but, one of the people that protested the Nuremberg war trials was the young Senator John F. Kennedy. And in fact, when he wrote Profiles in Courage, one of the chapters in Profiles in Courage was Senator Robert Taft, who it was for his outspoken opposition to the Nuremberg trials. I don't think very many Americans know that. They still kind of say, Profiles in Courage, that was pretty cool. Did you know what one of the chapters is about? And but they'll still talk about Nuremberg. No, that's the last thing we need to do because it wasn't justice. But again, these things happen. They get accepted and actually get cited. Like I said, a lot of people, good people in the conspiracy world say, we need another Nuremberg. No, that's a show trial. And it's what you're seeing in Washington, D.C. You're seeing a show trial of the January 6th prisoners, which not that they could have gotten a fair trial anyhow, but you're putting them on trial with no defense at all. It's a one-sided prosecution that's being televised nationally. Yeah. And you would still expect them to get a trial on a court? Where?
Yeah. It doesn't even make sense. No, I've actually never heard this criticism of the Nuremberg trial, or if I did, I didn't, I didn't get to focus on it enough to really take it in. And so I'd love to hear more about that, but it makes sense to me. I often think of, that how much of what they're doing is for the sound clip and the, video bite and the headline that they can then in 10 years go, look, this is what happened. You see, the press reported it this way. So here's what it is. They're kind of like making history in the moment, whether it's true or not, right? Because the things that you see in history books, we don't get to see if it was retracted a day later or how many people said, that's not even true. Why is this in a newspaper? Those kinds of things we're seeing now. How much of it is that? And so the Nuremberg trials could also fit into that as this sort of show trial and this way to have this way of looking back on it that wasn't ever real to begin with.
Right. And that's, I'm glad you're interested in it, and I don't think the reason you've never heard any criticism of it, because I think I'm probably the first person, to whatever degree I had a platform to do it in my book. I think I'm probably the first person to criticize the Nuremberg. Both the left and the right think it's the ultimate brand of justice. But at the time, and I have all the quotes from the figures in the book, not only Senator Robert Taft, not only young JFK, but you had both of Eisenhower's brothers, lots of people that were big at the time that talked about this is wrong. This is, you don't, it's the trial of the trial of the vanquished by the did that. But so it's important for us to know, and it's wrong, but you can see, obviously, most people don't believe that. And that's the problem, is that both sides, and for someone like me trying to write the kind of history, the hidden history that I write about, I've got to contend with the left and the right, because the right, reveres Abraham Lincoln as much or more than the left does. And that kind of, so it's really hard to get past that. And I've had people that liked everything else I wrote, but they couldn't get past my Lincoln thing. Oh, I love Lincoln. What do you mean? Okay. I just look at the record. That's all I'm saying. You love the myth. I loved him too. I used to love the myth too, but
right. Until you saw through it.
Yeah. You just look at his record, what he did. I mean, he shut down over 250 newspapers. He put, at least 14,000 American Northerners in prisons without any charges, and just threw them in there. There were books written at the time, American like that, about it, that have been shoved way down the memory hole. Most Americans don't know about, but just very, and everything, the entire, the reason we had Jim Crow laws and all that was all born out of the aftermath of the Civil War, because Reconstruction, where you had the North, occupied, militarily occupied, again, the defeated people, they occupied those states for several years. And again, most Americans don't know that the only reason we might still have Reconstruction today, for all I know, in military occupation of the South, because we had you had it until 1876, right? 76, yeah. The only reason it ended was because in 1876, you had the first incredible, you talk about electoral fraud. You had a guy named Samuel Tilden, who was a pretty decent Democrat, and he won both the popular and the electoral vote against Rutherford B. Hayes. But he didn't, there were still some states up for grabs. The electorate, he was ahead, but there were still some states left to go. So they threw it into the House of Representatives, which the Republicans controlled. So they just created a special committee and obviously every state, the Republicans voted for the Republicans. So they voted 8-7 or something for every one of those states. And the election was given to Rutherford B. Hayes. But even at that time, they had a little more propriety. So even though they were doing something really wrong, I guess they had a pang of conscience. So they gave a few concessions to the Democrats. And one of them was a really big concession. And that was they ended Reconstruction. So Reconstruction might not have ever ended if it hadn't been for electoral fraud. Most Americans don't know that, but that's what hidden history is. So books, you'll find out lots of things like that. But that's but Reconstruction again paved the way. And after Reconstruction ended, it opened the floodgates, and the KKK, for instance, was born because of the terror that the white people and that it's felt in the South. And the reason they dressed in white sheets was not, they decided to do that was not because of they wanted to hide their identities, but because they wanted to play on the superstitious nature of the slaves. And so they pretended they were ghosts.
Oh,
And that
wow.
was the idea of it, and it worked. Because and it wasn't until much later that they became violent and started lynching and by that time the people that had originally Robert E. Lee, all of them repudiated the KKK, and that's what created the Jim Crow laws. All that was born out of the first of all the terrible anger the South felt, justified for what had happened to them under Sherman and the troops, the atrocities, the women and children, the rapes and the plunder. And again, I described in my book, had massive theft on an unimaginable scale. I mean, they were stealing from every family that they went through, and it's documented in letters of Northern soldiers. This is perfect, best evidence, as they call it. But there was all that hostility that the South naturally felt, and then once Reconstruction came, they had to deal under that. So they did, they became many of them became real racist when they probably hadn't been really racist before. And they turned their hostility towards blacks. And that's when they created separate but equal and separate restrooms and all that. And that was, I think Ron Paul, who wrote the introduction to my book, Ron Paul wrote the foreword to Crimes and Cover-Ups.
How cool.
Honored for that. And he said on the record, it created 100 years of, horrible race relations. But it was all born out of the unnecessary Civil War and the actions that followed the Reconstruction. But most Americans don't know that. And I don't know what they think. They just think that Southerners were, these drooling, evil, tobacco chewing, evil. I don't know what they think, but there's a lot more to it than that. But, people should try to learn their history, because, you do, as Santayana said, those who don't know their history are condemned to repeat it. And we don't know our history, so we keep repeating it.
Yeah, we're just indoctrinated into this belief system of what happened. And I have never, until right now, thought of the KKK as possibly terrified people who were not hateful at all and started that way. Yeah. And I'm even wondering now, maybe how much this was infiltrated to turn it into more of a lynching and more hateful sort of organization.
I'm sure it probably was, because the government has always infiltrated these groups, and that was the first really big extremist group. So yeah, certainly, because they were, again, the original, one of the guys who gets really bad press is Nathan Bedford Forrest. A couple of years ago, I don't know, but I remember writing about it at the time. How do you do this? They had I think it was a state legislator or something, or local, voted to exhume the bodies of Nathan Bedford Forrest and his wife from the cemetery just to move them. It's like, I don't know how you can legally do that, but again, the law doesn't matter with political correctness and everything. He was a racist, and he was the first leader of the KKK. The problem is, and I write in Crimes and Cover-Ups about the real Nathan Bedford Forrest, is that once it started turning violent, he repudiated it. And he not only repudiated early civil rights activists, and I have all the statements where he went and talking about, equal justice and all that stuff. So, but in the minds of the court historians and the American people, he's this evil, horrible grand wizard of the KKK. And he just wasn't. And most of the people that were involved with and again, I'm not making any, because the KKK, I knew a girl when I was young whose grandfather had been killed by the KKK because she was Catholic, and I'm Catholic. So they didn't just, go after blacks or Jews. Right. But so it becomes something completely different. But that's, people don't know. I can tell you lots of historical anecdotes like that. Another thing that most people don't know when they hear, especially now we talk about free speech, and of course it's under fire, that most people have heard the expression, well, we have free speech, but you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. Well, the problem is, where did that come from? And, I didn't know until I was researching World War I. And wasn't coined by Oliver Wendell Holmes, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, great liberal, big warmonger, of course, eugenicist, like all the most great liberals are. And he wrote that decision, and basically it was people like Eugene Debs, the great socialist, and other anti-war activists. Naturally, were opposing World War I, which there's absolutely no reason to be fighting. It was ridiculous. Probably the most ridiculous of all the ridiculous wars. It had no reason for it at all. Nobody, even the court historians can't give a reason for World War I. But millions, died around the world. But they were put in prison by Woodrow Wilson. He imprisoned the people that were protesting World War I. So naturally, they took it to the Supreme Court. And Oliver Wendell Holmes turned them down and ruled with the government. And his decision included the expression, "Well, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater." That's where it comes from. He invented the phrase in 1918. So in case you wonder where that came from,
political dissent.
as I pointed out many times, you look at it, the people who were protesting World War I were not yelling fire in a crowded theater. So
No.
That's what our government told us at that time was that if you attempt to test one of our wars, you're yelling fire in a crowded theater, and you don't have the right to do that. And again, it happened, and I assume very few people objected at the time. Said it took me how long to just be researching it. I didn't even know that's where it came from. So that's how much it got buried and forgotten. So, so when people say that expression, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, I always educate them. And I say, you know where that came from, right? No, nobody does. I said, well, that's twice. So do you think protesting a war is yelling fire in a crowded theater, do you? And that's what they were telling us. And it's people need to know their history. And if you understand where some of this stuff comes from, then you're better educated and you become really fully awake. Because, most people, when we're talking about awake, they're awake to 9/11. They're awake to certainly the real thing with COVID, and maybe they're awake to some of the school shootings if they're going down that rabbit hole. So they're awake on more modern issues, but they don't know the history to it. They've awaked maybe in some degree with JFK, but when they learn about these things like that, it opens up a whole new area to them because they realize how big it is and how all-encompassing it is and how long it's been going on. And it's very important to realize because these things all come together. And, the common thing is just an overriding corruption that is just can't be defeated, or, apparently we've never tried to defeat it because it has happened throughout history and very few people have ever fought against it.
Yeah, it feels like they change it just enough, just frequently enough, and indoctrinate enough, and move the goalpost just enough that people are just constantly confused. By the time enough steam gets built up, it's a whole new thing now, right? The Great Reset is coming, so we'll see what comes next, and people will have forgotten so much, even that you are exposing here and researching, and sharing with people. It's just really sad. And like we said, there's so many things you can bring up and people will just automatically, like you said, I don't remember exactly what it was, but I was with you until you were talking about Abraham Lincoln and I love him. Yeah. So, now I'm lost. Yeah. Or if you bring up the Southern flag, right? And I'll say, no matter what we even think about what was happening and why the war actually took place and who was right or wrong or whatnot, it's still just a flag that represents this region and their desire to have been independent. And when people are flying it today, quite often that is their intention, is they feel some pride in that, and they want it to be remembered, and people will just know it's racist no matter what. You're racist for thinking it could possibly be acceptable, and all those people are racist. And I'm like, well, that's really sad that you can't question this thing, right? Your emotions are just in the way. Shut it down.
It's when people say it's racist, it's laughable. I just laugh. I don't really get called racist much. It's amazingly, but
that's amazing.
It could be by their definition. I could be, but again, because I don't care, because it's ridiculous. The term racist has lost all meaning when you say, and they have, that birds are racist, that brown paper bags are, that grammar is racist, that Dr. Seuss is when they said Dr. Seuss was racist, I remember I said, Dr. Seuss in his time, again, know your history. he was accused of being a communist by the at the time. They thought he was a commie. And so I said, if Dr. Seuss is a racist, then what do you call the Grand Imperial Wizard of the KKK?
Yeah.
So are they both the same? I don't have an answer for that. Because they know, is he super, super, super racist? I mean, the term means nothing. When everything is racist, nothing is. And so genuine racism that happens now, it's just nobody pays attention to, especially people like me I'm just jaded by hearing about it. And so at this point, yeah, I would be suspicious of anyone claiming that that something was racist, because you've said every time about the boy that cried wolf. I mean, you said everything is. So it's it's like the old expression, when everyone is beautiful, no one is, because there's no contrast. And so for everything to be racist, there has to be people that aren't racist to contrast it with, right?
Yeah.
But when you've now said, well, no, if you're white, you're racist. So it's a natural attribute of white people, white supremacy, white privilege. So again, it's lost all purpose, except you. And it's usually white people telling us that.
Yeah.
And so I also, if I get to tell them, I say, well, so you're white, right? So are you exempting yourself? Are you exempting? Do you have children? Are you exempting them? Are you exempting your parents? Because I mean, you're condemning all white people. So except for you, right? Except for your family. I mean, so but no one confronts them on that. In fact, and typically the other side will say, "Oh, I'm not racist. No, I'm not racist. No, don't play that game." Confront them on their, let them know, first of all, you're white, because most of the time it's going to be somebody white saying it. And so you're white. Do you realize you're white? So you're condemning yourself, you can your kids, and they have no answer for that.
No. And it's so interesting. This is like a different version of newspeak, right? They're not removing it from the dictionary. The word racist is still there, but we don't have meaning for it anymore. Like you said, what does it mean then when someone is actually hatefully, working against a group of people because of the color of their skin? Because that's not what you're describing these other things. So we've lost more meaning, and therefore we've lost the ability to really think of it clearly. That was the whole point in 1984, is you can't think and you can't act if you don't have the language for it.
That's right. And that's part of, again, it's the battle on that, because again, we don't control, and that's why, an underlying theme in everything I write is a mass criticism, a blanket condemnation of our mainstream media, our state-controlled media. None of my books would have been written, or would have had need to write them, if we had a free press that actually did their job. Yeah. Because then there wouldn't be hidden history to uncover, because the historians would have uncovered it, right? But they're not interested in it. And I know, I've talked to them before, and they don't just, if you talk to journalists, and I got started doing this as a teenager when I was working with Mark Lane as a volunteer for the Citizens Committee of Inquiry. We're trying to get Congress to lobby to open the Jfk assassination, reopen it. And just trying to talk to some of those journalists. I mean, even then, it was just impossible. They had no interest. They had no interest in the truth. They had no interest in investigating anything. And obviously, they have even less interest now. I mean, they were then than they are now, but they still had no interest. And same thing today, if you tried to find a journalist anywhere that would, on the 9/11 anniversary, if you tried to find a journalist anywhere in the media, including Tucker Carlson, that would be interested in some of the information we could show them about the 9/11 narrative, you couldn't find a person. They would not give you, they have zero interest in it. Their minds are completely closed. And again, that's the problem, is that investigative journalism is supposed to be just that. They're supposed to, people like us, we're the ones that are doing the work they should be doing. And we don't have the platforms they do, maybe. And who knows how good of a job we could be doing if we're paid like them. Can you imagine being paid what they're paid to
have just people to do things for you? I'm like, oh, every single thing, my graphics, my music, my whatever, it's all me. All of it's me. Those people have teams of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine that. Imagine how inspired you'd be, and imagine how great the work you did would be under those conditions. But
you could be running like a whole, actual university that actually teaches people history, like, where they're actually learning. That'd be great.
Well, I would like, and several people have told me, God, your book should be, it should be Douglas Caddy, who's was a Watergate lawyer, and he was one of my early supporters. Now he has Trump derangement syndrome now, though, so he's still very nice. But yeah, but and again, I'm a Trump agnostic, but people don't understand that,
Right. You have to be either for or against. You can't be anything else. Yeah.
Right. So but he's still been very said in the review he wrote about hidden history that if he was teaching law today, my book would be required reading for his law students. So that's a very great honor to have someone say that. I think Ron Paul said something like that, and other people have as well. I mean, and really, either one of us would certainly give students a lot more understanding of history. They'd know a lot more about history. It's just that it wouldn't be written from the subjective standpoint, which is not objective, but it's the coincidental theory of history, which is the establishment view, whereas I'm writing from the conspiratorial view that these things happened because people are corrupt, our leaders are corrupt, and we're mired in corruption, and there's not only a tendency but a reality to conspire on it. So when people tell me, "You think," I embrace that. I said, "Yes, I do," because
everything is a conspiracy. If you just look at the definition of the word conspiracy, you and I conspired to come together and do a show tonight. Like,
that's right. That's what exactly right. And we're our leaders conspire on a daily basis against the interests of the people. And this is a natural way of this. They don't know any other way to do business. They don't know any other way to do it. So it's not even a criticism of reality, but so again, I think too many people that are awake, they backtrack. They say, "Well, no, I don't believe this." No, first of all, I'm open to everything. I don't. In fact, I'm working in a book now with a friend of mine about the Paul is dead theory of the Beatles. I mean, I don't think he's dead, but we're working on it. It's a kind of an interesting thing. We got a bunch of celebrities to contribute to it. My friend's idea, but I'm helping him with it. But so something like that. I mean, I don't think that's, but I don't condemn really people that believe it. I'm interested by it, interested in it. And again, because of the fact, I've had a flat earther on my show. I'd like to talk to hollow earthers. I'm open to the computer simulation theory and stuff. I'm open-minded about everything because I know we're being lied to about everything. So I don't necessarily say, but I'm not open-minded in terms of, I'm not going to consider anybody who says Lee Harvey Oswald killed JFK or that 9/11 was done by 19 crazed Arabs. Kind of on that. I don't think I pretty much seen the evidence there, but I think people backtrack and they say, well, we can't go that far. No, I think we maybe need to go farther.
Right. No, that's really, I think, if that would save the world, right? If everyone had that sort of open mind and ability to just say, I don't know, maybe let's look, let's see the evidence, right? It's not going to hurt us. I did want to get your take on, going back to sort of newspeak and this, demonization of words or new meanings of words and taking the ability to think away from us. I've been on this trip for a while now where I'm just looking at the idea of public health, the phrase public health, and that in itself is this psyop, that led the way to this whole thing that we're experiencing. If we didn't have that concept to begin with, just nailed into us over and over again, we wouldn't have been able to get here. And when you look at what it actually is, what is it? It's nothing. What does public health even mean, right? It means basically that someone else gets to tell you what to do and call it healthy, right? I mean, that's it. And I don't know if you've thought about this much, but it blows my mind that just this word could be implanted in a certain place and time, and then it can just be built on until we can crash the world economy and change all of global politics from this one little phrase, basically.
Well, we have, and I've written a lot about what I call the medical industrial complex. We don't have they call it a healthcare system. Whatever it is, it's the worst. It's the worst in the alleged. There's alleged first world nations. I mean, it just. And I've talked to many people in England, especially in Canada, and you say about those systems, but they are ours does, and ours is just bloated, incredibly expensive. I worked my entire adult life, and mostly in IT, but I worked for the medical industrial complex. So I've seen the sausage being made, and it's not pretty. And but again, most Americans said when Obamacare was introduced, and there's a great outcry from the right, and it was portrayed as something it wasn't. I mean, it was not government insurance at all. It wasn't any kind of socialist medicine. It actually made a bad situation hard to do because it mandated that you buy it, which it should be unconstitutional that you have to purchase something, but it didn't. It didn't do it made a few improvements in terms of pre-existing conditions and things, but it wasn't this great new horror that the right claimed it to be, and of course it wasn't anything good really that the left claimed it to be. But it's shameful what we see. There's people that go bankrupt every day in this country because they can't afford medical care. Marriages break up over it. People, and this has been going on for decades. I remember it had a great impact on me when I was a young guy. This older guy had a blue collar job, physical labor. And this guy was older, much too old to be doing that job. And it was a part-time job. And he worked pretty much up until he died. He was dying of cancer. And he had to do it to pay his bills for his wife and kids. And, that should never happen. But I'm sure that's not the only instance. I just always remembered that guy. To me, that was very heroic. But that's the shameful system we have. And it's, I have a friend now. I mean, the people I tend to hear from are usually not doing very well, in terms financially or anything. And from a lot of from people that are, don't. Some of them are homeless. So I don't know how they listen to my shows or whatever, but somehow they do. But one of these guys is, diabetes. He's got like 9 toes. He's missing a toe already, and he can't afford insulin because of he doesn't his crappy job didn't give him health insurance, and that's the case all across. Dismiss this. It's not. And again, I think we should withdraw because the medical industrial complex is horrible. So I tell you to take your vitamins and exercise, and you can do a better job pretty much of being your own doctor, I think. But most people don't listen to that. But that's what I would suggest. But for those people that can't or are already mired in it, then it's really disgraceful that so many people are like him, and he's certainly not alone by any. I've known other people like that as well, and it's just, but that's a reality. Survival of the richest. I wrote about the other side of America there. The bottom 50 to 1% of the collective wealth. Half the country has less than 1% of the collective wealth. Yeah, first world economy. Country has nothing. Yeah. Again, most people don't know the economic statistics of that. I mean, I have money in the stock market for my 401k days, but so I'm interested in watching the stock market. Most people don't know that 90% of the stocks are owned by 10% of the people. You know that? So I mean, it's irrelevant to the vast majority. So again, I talk a lot about that other half of America. The ones that don't have anything, the ones that, or even more than that. We have I think it's up to 70-some% of Americans live paycheck, don't have $500 in savings. 70-some%. That's the reality. And again, the right doesn't want to hear that. And
oh no, we just lost him. That's so sad. Maybe he'll come back in. I hope so. This has been a fascinating discussion. I know we were probably about to start winding down anyways. So if we don't get Don back, that is the great Don Jeffries. And I do want to ask him just a few more things if he does pop back in. I know we've had weird connection issues this whole time. Oh, here he is. He's made it back in.
And somebody didn't like what I was saying, I guess.
More. Perhaps. No, he left again. We'll see what happens. This is always what's fun about being live. I do, if you just are wondering about the update, I do really like this new software. As you may have noticed, I figured out the intros and the outros, and so I don't have to stare at you blankly while music plays at you. But here he is again. We'll see if it works this time. We'll talk about maybe a few more things before we say goodnight.
Hello.
There
you
you
hear me?
go. Yeah, you're back. And now it seems happier about whatever it needs to be doing in the background. So
I guess they didn't like what I was.
Yeah, don't talk about poor people and how actually economically bereft this country was even before.
Anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hear it, huh?
It's true though, and I feel like I've been hearing this my whole life. Oh, you're fine. I'm glad you made it back in. Oh, now I think we have just a bit of connection issues, perhaps. Oh, there it goes again. Man. Who knows? You know, there's also these sunspots going on. They're super intense lately, and I don't know how much of that is affecting this, but I always just assume it's the NSA or, you know, whatever. So we can just say hi to our agent out there that is in charge of fucking with us and hope that he's learning enough, or she is learning enough to maybe not be an agent anymore. I always laugh though when I talk about this because I doubt that there's actual agents. I'm nearly sure that it's all algorithms, if it's anything. So, well, if we don't get Donald Jeffries back in, I am going to direct you to some places where you can go find him. I know he's on Substack, which is an awesome place where he has a really cool writing. Obviously, you can find all of those books. I'm going to read you those titles again. Some of them, Hidden History, of course, is the one that we've been talking about the most tonight. Hidden History 3 is about to come out, hopefully early next year. I think Don's right back in here now, so we'll be able to talk to him about it.
Can you hear me now?
Back. Yeah, I can hear you and see you again.
I don't know what's happening.
I assume it's the NSA, but I mean, who knows? They like to maybe cause problems.
I hope it's your software and they're not going to.
I hope so too. Let's cross our fingers and hope that it's that. It's been a bit buggy today, so it really might be that. Well, I guess we can sort of start to go towards the end anyway. I do want to ask you how much of this you think has always been in process to the ends of a sort of globalization or globalism. You know, when I think about the Geneva Conventions, the Nuremberg trials, the Geneva Conventions do you think that was maybe the first time we had sort of a globalist idea that this could be the rules for the whole world and that sort of thing? And is that where we've always been headed with these psychopaths?
I'll talk about that too, because you actually had something like that back in the Civil War era. And I talk about how Lincoln came up with something different, and that paid for the concepts of total war and war against civilians and things you won't find anywhere else. But I'll have that in Hidden History 3, and certainly Woodrow Wilson on with the League of Nations idea. Woodrow Wilson is probably the first full globalist in the White House, and another great eugenicist. But the League of developed it later into the United Nations, and at that, once we joined that, and right in the heart of America, certainly by that time, pretty much anybody that was allowed in the JFK was considered a globalist when he was allowed. He certainly behaved like one at first. There has not been a non-globalist, unless you want to count Trump. Trump talked about against globalism. When he in office, he said, "I'm a globalist and a nationalist." Like, okay, that was Trump.
And he's shaking hands with Klaus Schwab too. So
yeah,
I mean, I can't trust that guy.
So he was the only one that had the rhetoric. Nobody. I mean, Reagan was he did all the other things the globalists did. So we haven't had anything like a nationalist in American politics. And that's why I think, again, to the extent I think I call Trump project. I believe that he was an actor, but if you want to take him at face value, then that would have been the thing that the the elite quite a bit. His talking about putting America first and being a nationalist, getting control of the borders. These are anathema to them. They don't allow that. That's not part of our world. You want to open borders, at least for the Western countries, and we don't want any of this kind of restrictions. You don't want any ties, any concerns about. We want you to put these foreign concerns front and center, and that's why we're always getting involved in these pointless wars. And again, he said a lot of great stuff,
but didn't always necessarily act in alignment with it.
No.
Yeah,
but he said a lot of great stuff.
Yeah. Well, the whole QAnon and 5G chess thing, it's like really intelligent of them to pull off this psyop, because you can then explain anything away forever, right? It's just like Satan. It can always be the boogeyman, no matter what evil's going on in the world. And so it's really convenient. You don't really have to look too deeply at him standing with Klaus Schwab saying that Klaus Schwab is such a great man. You're right, because that's just 5G chess. So if you were going to put a name to it, is globalist good enough? Is eugenicist good enough? Or is there something else that's at the sort of crux of this push throughout history?
Well, they are all globalists. Most of them are eugenics. People ask me, I think there is more to it. I think there's, if you want satanic, but I think there's a dark force behind it. I do.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't think this is just strictly an earthly thing, a human thing. I think that is inspired by dark forces. And again, it's simple just to say,
oh no, why would you end right there? Oh, I hope he can come back in. He's probably super annoyed at having to come back in so often, but that was really interesting. I didn't know Donald Jeffries was going to take us there. But obviously you all know me, and you know that I agree with him 100%. And we can give it the name Satanism, even though I just said Satan is just a good boogeyman. But whatever you need to call it, it is evil and dark. And here he is again. So we get to hear more about it, which is very exciting to me. He's almost here. I see it trying. There it is. There you are.
I guess the devil ain't either. Okay.
Yeah, that's probably the true force behind it. So we'll just protect this.
Yes.
You can continue.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there's something, and that's why I think this is, one of the things that that I believe is really true, is this is a spiritual battle we're in. We're in a spiritual battle, and so I think that faith, and I think probably at this point, because I think that there's nothing that they're doing, the level of corruption and tyranny. When you see things like the all that stuff, I mean, thing that was something like that, I think that's beyond even of human beings, I think. And I don't think something be so. I mean, I don't know if you've seen lately, disturbing too. They're showing little girls, or maybe teenagers or whatever, their breasts removed, and they're all posing proudly with this huge scar, and it's like to me, I don't know what you would call that beyond except Satanism. What is that? That, and the fact that the doctors are posing with.
No. Oh man, it's so frustrating. We're just getting to the good part, and it keeps cutting our friend Donald Jeffries off, and I'm so sad about that. He's absolutely right, though. It is so disgusting to see this. It's being celebrated. And I've said it before, but I've had surgeries, obviously. And at no point was I wanting to celebrate them, even though my surgeries were very different. I had spinal correction surgery. I have metal rods along my spine and, other things. And I wouldn't go around celebrating even that. And even those I would come to under great amounts of thought, into whether or not I should do this or not, because surgery, there's always a risk of death 100% of the time, even simple surgeries. That is always one of the possible side effects. So it does not make sense to celebrate this at all. It is disgusting to see small children, often under 18, with this. You've probably all seen it as well. We call them The zipper chest. There you are again.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm in 100% agree with you that this is dark forces at work, and that it is really important, I think, for people to understand that, because it helps you at least to see what's actually happening and to understand the things we were talking about, like how could our friends and family also fall into this? And it's not because they have gone evil, it's because that's how great the pressure is and the energy is. That is terrifying. It's terrifying to face that.
Absolutely.
So
So I just think that's, to me, I'm shocked at seeing it. I'm shocked that they constantly, and it's I don't know. When I do that, I just think of God, and because I don't know any other way to fight it, and I don't know. It's really tragic that this is happening, but I think that's the biggest transgender story hour, and that kids being taken to see drag shows and stuff, and to me there's nothing beyond the thing. I don't think, but that's the way I look at it. But I'll probably get knocked off again. But so I hope you'll be able to restore this interview to some people listening to it live. Are probably wondering what the hell is going on. But I don't know. We just keep getting knocked off for some reason.
yeah, it's actually cool. The way this program is going to export the final video, it should have very little disturbance, which is pretty amazing. But it is unfortunate for people watching live that we've had a little bit of issues. But your ideas have come through loud and clear. Your information has come through loud and clear. And I think we've seen this insight into history, the hidden history, one might say, that we weren't often given a window towards. And I am always so grateful when I get to learn something new. And you have given me something new today, which is really fun for me. It's not all that common. And that's what I think this is all about, is helping people and ourselves grow and learn more and see this problem for what it actually is, especially like you have that long view of it, that this has been going on for such a long time, and that there is actually this other component to it. It's not just a human failing. It's actually goes beyond that into the spiritual. I think all of that is really important to share with people. So I'm so grateful that you do that.
Well, I appreciate it, man. I hope you got something out of it, and I apologize to I don't think the problem is on my end. At least I hope it's not.
I don't think
I
so
keep
either.
getting knocked off, but I hope it hasn't been. Getting interested now. What? I hope they didn't tune out because of it, but it is what it is. Maybe it is nefarious forces doing it, but that's the way I look at it. Anyhow, I think that I don't think this is a. But I've always been that way. I'm an extreme kind of guy. When in the Jfk Assassination research community, a lot of people tried to say, well, it's this is maybe there was a benign cover up, and there was some anti.
Oh my God, how frustrating. I feel like every time he starts to talk, it starts to kick him off. I wonder. Oh, well, we'll see if he can come back or not, and maybe we'll just wrap it up, and maybe we'll have to have him back another time. You know what? And I'm just thinking maybe this is my fault, because maybe I didn't say that there are certain browsers that work better with this software, and I should probably be telling people that.
I'm using. I think it seems like every time I switch subjects, that I get knocked off. So
yeah, that's what I was thinking too. If you do have Brave or Chrome and you want to try that, that's supposed to work better.
I'm using Chrome.
Oh, see, it should be fine. Well, it might be good to just wrap up anyway then, since we keep getting interrupted, and maybe you'll definitely have to come back again if you would enjoy that. I would love that, and we can talk more about it. But yeah, I do. If you can share, finish sharing about the JFK people and what they were criticizing you for before we go, that would be great. Of course, I know you're probably really frustrated having to jump back on again every time.
It's well, I hope it comes out okay in the recorded version, but no, it's like I said, that.
Wow, you guys. Okay, there's no other explanation. Oh, see, someone is sharing in the chat that Corey was just on Legit Bat talking about the Jews again, and he didn't even get kicked off for that, and they're using similar software. So yeah, that's really strange. Anyways, we'll see If he comes back once again, I'll just let him wrap up and tell you where to find him. Okay, here he is. We'll do that, and then we'll say goodbye, and then we'll do it again another time. It's been a fantastic episode either way. So I know I'm very happy that we all got to talk about these things with Donald Jeffries. All right, maybe just tell us where people can find you.
I give up. My website is donaldjeffries.media. Substack is donaldjeffries.substack.com. This is every Friday on rockfin.com Eastern. donaldjeffries.media, my website. You can find out everything. At Don Jeffries at Twitter. I mean, I'm all over the place, and I'm sorry that interruptions, but I really enjoyed talking with you.
Oh, I really enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much. And I am also sorry that we had that. And if you would be a dear and when we are done in a moment saying goodbye, if you could just mute your mic and your camera and then but stay on for a minute, it'll tell you when it's done uploading, and that will be really, really cool. If it does, and if it doesn't, feel free to go about your day.
Okay, I'll mute my mic and the camera.
And just stay on for like a minute. It should say done on it should be. Well, we'll see how it goes.
Thank you.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming tonight. And I do always want to ask people, and I want to ask you what your final words would be to people who are out there listening, aside from, we hope the quality is okay. Oh no, now you are muted. Sorry. The practice run.
I muted it
too soon.
Sorry about that. I muted it too quick. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I think this is a spiritual battle, and tell people to keep the fight up, that we are fighting.
All right. Well, I will agree with Donald Jeffries' final statement. Keep the fight up. We are fighting for good. It is a spiritual battle. So sorry about all of this. You know how it is when you're talking about these things. And so we will get Donald Jeffries back. And of course, fellow travelers of the path, it is a beautiful thing. And this has been your analog electric concentric dose of wisdom, according to the fearless researcher and historian of hidden histories, Donald Jeffries. Donald, thank you so much for sharing with us tonight. Thank you for being here. And I hope, like you said, that you'll come back again. And we'll see you then. Oh, there you are. Thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you.
All right. We'll see you later. All right. Well, truth is an enigma, and it is clear, bright, ever present, never changing, and fully viewable by anyone from anywhere in any state of mind. Yet still it goes unseen, unheeded, and ignored by people in various states of being from all over the world, of every age and background. Truth, it seems, is only perceived by a heart that is capable of loving presence, a heart that doesn't recoil from what is shattered and ugly, a heart that can look at itself covered in darkness and murk and continue to shine back the light of truth that shines forth no matter what may come. This is a spiritual battle, not a physical one. Until you know it and shine through the muck, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first.
I heard the Bilderbergers called you. And I was like, hello? Hello? Ain't nobody answering shit, man. I mean, for real, man. I must have hung up. Phone rang again. And I was like, hello? Ain't nobody even answering, dog. Some real shit, man. They tapping my telephone.
It's really the real when you step to the plate. And it ain't too late to change the ways of being fake. Humans create with creativity, so make what you create to shine through. All niggas wanna do is shine. Make your view rhyme, but the deaf to the blind. For those left behind, I crept and I climbed to the top of my mind. And I found I've been taught to be conformed, and I was never warned of the signs. Crimes committed as an adolescent, now I'm trapped through the system stressing. With aggression and emotive, through passion and emotion, to set the truth in motion. They gave me Zola for a rainy day, and they gave me Zoprex to sleep my life away. Society's labeled a man to be bipolar. Might as well gave me heroin and Coca-Cola. This is how Western medicine work. This is also how Western religions work. And Americans work 9 to 5, not asking the questions of how, when, where, what, and why. I remain on the quest, thirsty for salvation, with a taste of blood, with a fallen warrior's dream of surviving this flood of chaos. Those who continue to judge a book by its cover are way off, breaking these laws of a scarred prison, reminiscent
lie. Breaking these bars of a scar prison, reminiscing of pain, taming niggas up in the system. Gotta live in a lie with a cry, nobody hears ya. Chances survive to revive an immortal alive.
We're conditioned to be housebroken and weekend. Labor all week, pay payment with the rest, drive away the weekend. Wires and voltages set strategically to damage chakras. Make sure to take those prescriptions, give it to you by the doctor. Wash it down with contaminated water. Worship a holy father, eat trash food, remain drained from the slaughter. Mother Nature's now the Illuminati's daughter. Through molestation, unnoticed by the blind mind in every nation. Not allowed to know God is present in each and every individual. Ancient truth forgotten except the Bohemian Grove rituals. Inbred bloodlines created unruly ruling class of elites, cold as reptiles. The awoken even see the signs on the streets. Encryptions passed off as fiction and paranoid reaction. 33s and bows with skulls are laughing right now with Kennedy's assassin. 2 pillars burning. History repeats as I babble on truth. Right now I fake for centuries. I change their plans when I'm up in the booth.
Everlasting presence of life got me up in the night, not knowing if I'm wrong or right. Something within me tells me to fight, and it's like I'm trying to find the true nature of being God. Fight versus religious beliefs, which indeed tells me I'm doomed from day one out the womb. They want us to be consumed with fear, with negative thoughts engineered to fear God, and that's to fear oneself, and that's real. You tell me that I'm imperfect, how is that when everything's for a reason? You forget that everything is meant to be, but they got us withering away, not knowing sacred geometry, which degrades philosophy of every soul, in which they try to control your mind with limitations, over exceeding your expectations. You be considered an outcast with lacerations, so I continue to master patience, creating ways to make it through the Piscean age that's getting close to the Aquarian stage. As I stand strong on my God-given ride, it's my life against all lies to penetrate these imprisoned walls that creates flaws and false laws. So y'all niggas better recognize before you die, before you had the chance to survive, and that's breaking these bars of a scar prison, reminiscing of pain, taming niggas up in the system. Got us living a lie with a cry, nobody hears ya. Chance to survive to revive an immortal lie. Breaking these bars of a scar prison, reminiscing of pain, taming niggas up in the system. Got us living a lie with a cry, nobody hears ya. Chance to survive to revive an immortal lie. Breaking these bars of a scar prison, reminiscing of pain, taming niggas up in the system. Got us living a lie with a cry, nobody hears ya. Chance to survive to revive an immortal lie. Breaking these bars of a scar prison, reminiscing of pain, taming niggas up in the system. Got us living a lie with a cry, nobody hears ya. Chance to survive to revive an immortal lie.